Hi, everyone. Welcome. Nice to see everybody here. Today I'm going to talk to you all about policy and how that really does make an impact for rare disease patients. And I'll do a little background on this. In 2015, I was working in gene therapy at UNC Chapel Hill. And gene therapy is all about, rare diseases. My boss, Dr. Jude Samolsky, was committed to finding a cure for DMD. He still is. And I saw patients come in and they were just desperate for people to help. They'd come meet with the researchers and they'd meet with the clinicians. We had people coming from all over the world that would just come visit. And the basic bottom line they left us with is, please hurry. So as a result of working in that, and I have a finance and personnel background, so this was not in my area. So anybody, people can do this. People think, I can't do one of these councils, but obviously that you can. So I partnered up with a patient advocate, and she said, look, let's hold a legislative breakfast, and let's think about submitting legislation for a Rare Disease Advisory Council. I said, that sounds great. We did. We were at the legislature quite a bit, educating the legislators, because we can't go down there and advocate, as you know. So we were educating the legislators about rare disease and how important it was that, the rare disease community, which makes up approximately 10% of each state's population, educating them on, how many people this could impact. So the interesting part was I was talking to one of the senators that we were trying to get to champion our legislation back in 2015 and 16. And that senator said, why should I? I said, because 1 million of your constituents has a rare disease. That does not count the people who can't work, contribute to the economy, and just the community that it takes to take care of rare disease patients. So I just wanted to give you a little background and history on how that all started, and then we'll go from there. And why have a Rare Disease Advisory Council? Well, North Carolina's council was the first in the nation, and we now have approximately 26, with about 3 to 4 right now in process. And I'm not going to read off the slides, you can see it, but it's about being accountable in your state to your rare disease community. It's very important, and always making sure the patient is at the center of everything we do, with policy, with everything. I don't hold meetings, I don't do anything in the rare disease work unless usually give talks unless a rare disease advocate is with me. It's just very, very key to always keep that in mind, and they're always center, and they're a part of the policy recommendations going forward. And so it really does bring the community in. After we created the North Carolina Council, it took me 18 months, and I went around North Carolina talking to anybody in the rare disease space, anybody and everybody. I was very fortunate that I had a lot of doors open for me, so I was able to meet a lot with CEOs of companies, the clinicians, the wonderful clinicians and researchers we have, dedicating their lives to rare disease. It was just really, it was amazing. So, and how do we take all of these people that are in the rare disease community, from foundations, state government, federal government, like the NIH, who I work closely with, and the rare disease patients and their organizations, how do we create an ecosystem? Our council really does ground that. And that people come together in the state, and your legislators, like in North Carolina, if there is any rare disease legislation that is introduced to the legislators, say by patient organizations or whatever, they run it, they send it to me, email it to me and say, give us your thoughts on this, how do we move forward? And then we bring patient advocates in to actually advise on that as well. So let me fast forward this. Those are a few reasons that this is good. And this is when we had, this is myself and the advocate and Representative Carney and Senator Pate, when we were pushing our legislation through. And basically, after we created this, I saw a need after several years that, wait a minute, why don't we just have one council? We should be creating, and there are organizations that create councils. And then people started reaching out and saying, look, why don't you help create and get these councils up and going? And I said, oh, that's a great idea. So that's when we created RDII, Rare Disease Innovations Institute. And we go in, and some councils that are created, it's kind of like, that have been created in the past, it was kind of like a checkbox. Oh, we get a council created. Well, if a council's not successful and if they don't get off the ground and they don't have a plan for sustainability, then what point is it writing the legislation to begin with to create a council? So RDAI focuses on going into states like in Illinois. They passed legislation several years ago, and their council was just finally now. People are trying to get that put together. But bringing the entities in the state, like your bios, and like I said before, your clinicians, researchers all together, and creating that network is just key, and it's really, really important. Okay. These are just tips for a successful council. We've created a toolbox within RDII that we're sharing. What I found in the rare disease space, in talking to patients, talking to advocates, basically everybody's saying the same thing. They recreate the wheel. They are shocked when they get the news of the diagnosis, if they can get a diagnosis. You know, it's the grief that follows, and you hear this, and you just feel it with every ounce of your soul for these parents who are just so desperate. And we just feel like this is a great resource. And when we created this council and saw the need for these to go across other states, it's very powerful. But the problem is that we face now is that a lot of these councils, everybody's still are in silos. The states, like in North Carolina, people call us, but everything is a one-off. Like, let me call this person. We don't have a central location or a repository where everybody can go to load legislation. So recently we just secured RDAC.org, and that is where we're going to have anybody that's with a council, a caucus, any type of coalition in the state around a group of rare disease policymakers. They will have access to this, and we are going to put out, we've written white papers on newborn screening in North Carolina. We wrote one 4.5 years ago. It was a 30-page white paper with probably 20 to 30 people interviewed for that white paper, clinicians, researchers, patients, advocates. And that white paper ended up going to the governor's office, went to the governor directly, actually, when we had 4 indications to be added to our newborn screening panel. They not only passed through, they went through, and we did automatic inclusion as well. And then we have people that, like, I work with, and I want to talk about this in policy and how you as a clinician can get involved about, it's not just about the council, but it's about who's getting involved, how does policy move forward. So, for example, just about a week or two ago, Dr. Priya Kishani, you're from Duke, who you will hear from in just coming right up. We had a legislative session in North Carolina, and we were the first to do this, and we're doing these in a lot of other states. Priya came in and addressed the legislators, as did Vandana Shashi with the Undiagnosed Network at Duke, and a person from Duke Margolis talking about access. I said, look, I told our legislators, I'd been at the legislative working, I said, look, gene and cell therapy are here. Therapies are coming quickly. The states are not ready for patient access. So we did an hour breakfast. The legislators, we had a really good attendance. They've asked many questions since and have asked me to form work groups to start addressing the needs in the state. This is where policy really can make a huge difference. Another way that policy makes a big difference, I just submitted federal legislation to Congressman Butterfield, who's currently co-chair of the Congressional Rare Disease Caucus, to create an ICD code for every rare disease and to change the current process so that patient advocates do not have to jump through hoops constantly begging for an ICD code, only to have for 10 and 11 years to be turned down because they don't receive one. So we're trying to make that more of an automated process, and so we can determine the prevalence of rare disease throughout the U.S. It's, again, I have a steering committee with different folks on it, but several patient advocates, because they are really driving it. They live this every single day. They were the ones that came up with a lot of the language. And when researchers or scientists say, well, we should do it this way, they come back and say, we live with it. This is what has to be implemented to make this work. It is key. And like Dr. Cindy Powell is on our steering committee, who's a geneticist at UNC. She has been very pivotal for us to be able to engage with Congress about this. All right. Newborn screening. So what happens, when you do create a council. Sorry about that. RDI, sorry. So we have created, like I said, toolboxes, but we go in and we say, look, let's take your state's priorities. Each state might have different priorities. However, newborn screening always has to be first and primary. It saves lives. I get questions all the time. Well, if it's between creating a council or submitting newborn screening legislation, what comes first? I said newborn screening is always going to come first because it does save lives. So we give them the tools for that. We have legislative language we use, and we think that's very, very effective. And now more and more states that are creating these councils, they are undertaking the newborn screening legislation and are very active right now, trying to do the same thing that we did in North Carolina. There we go. And this was just a newborn screening case study that we did back 4 years ago. Now, we have had problems, and I will be the first to admit, I work very closely with our state lab director, which I encourage our rare disease councils to do. And actually, we're forming one in Washington State at the moment, and we actually have the newborn screening lab director position on that council. We feel like that is just key. Geneticists in the states often also serve on these councils. Dr. Powell is critical to advising our council and to keep us updated with what's going on in your field. And these indications, even though they got added because of COVID, it set them back quite a bit. And, you know, that's been a source of a little bit of contention, but I think a lot of folks too, with newborn screening, when you add indications, there's new equipment to come, there's all types of training, there's all kinds of things. So hopefully, we actually, as a result of what happened with COVID, we wrote new legislation in coordination with Every Life Foundation last year, and this year we implemented a time restriction for newborn screenings to be implemented. And when I was working with IBM on some data projects for rare disease, and they said, look, we want you, IBM Watson, they said, we want to support you in this, go to Tokyo, talk about rare disease and how data is so important. Another reason to have the ICD codes and policy. And I didn't even have to really explain that much. They just say a picture before. One got diagnosed in time and one did not. And that picture speaks 1,000 words. I know this is your area. So anyway, we're very much policy related. And I always want you to encourage you, work with folks in your state. If your state's interested in developing a rare disease advisory council, please reach out to me. We are happy to help. We just want as many of these as possible. We want them throughout the whole United States for every state to have these. And what our nonprofit does is we build that network across the states. Eventually, we want to build a clinical and research network across the U.S. as well with these rare disease advisory councils. And like I said, the work you all do, we wouldn't be here doing this without the work you do. There we go. And I just want to thank you and just thank you for all the work you do and on, behalf of patients as well. It's just, getting that diagnosis. I've seen patients who take years and years and years, and then they get a diagnosis and it's like, it may not be a good diagnosis, but they have something that they can say, look, now I know why, my child is like this. Now I know why, the cause of this, I know the root. So it's very, very important, the work you all do in policy work at the federal and state level. So thank y'all for coming today, and let me know if you have any questions, and feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Thanks.
Can I just ask one question? So, as you know, Georgia just formed a council, and if you had something to do with that, thank you very much. And if you didn't, thank you anyway. And unfortunately, they haven't really reached out to the geneticists the way I thought they would have. We have one geneticist who's applied for the council, but it's just sort of odd that they didn't realize to just go straight to human genetics and the Division of Medical Genetics. So I'm just sort of wondering, what's with that, and if that's a little worry about like where they're going.
And who creates the council? I mean, there's space for everybody in this arena, and I'm like very supportive of every rare disease organization. The pharma companies who contacted me about Georgia, that was not, they asked me to review the legislation. I said, no, this is not, this is not set up for an effective council. But another organization took the lead with that and kind of pushed their own type of legislation through. So look, I'll reach out to you like afterwards, because we're currently in big discussions like right now with Georgia on this topic, as is other states as well. And I will tell you, we're hopefully having a conference in the first part of April for all the art acts to join together and come, and they've never had anything like that. So people can share their ideas, so people can talk about what's working. We've got access experts coming in that are in the state of Ohio and the state of Texas, and to people to talk about newborn screening and how can we do things better and more effectively in every single state. And I think that is just like, it's key to important that we have a network of people that you can call and that you can share your resources with, so everybody's not duplicating efforts. But I'm happy to reach out to you afterwards. Thank you.